Hi, it's Talking Reds. I'm Craig Hannan, joined today by Paul Cope. It's the Thursday before an international break, which would usually be, a little bit boring. There's not much to talk about, but this is the Craig and Cope show. We've got loads to talk about. First thing being Trent Alexander-Arnold. There's a brilliant interview today with him in the LFC on the LFC TV website. He speaks really, really well. It's interesting to get an insight into him as a person as well as a player, and sort of how he's developed and progressed to Liverpool's first team up until this stage. So he talks about his surprise at being chosen by Brendan Rodgers for the friendly against Swindon when he was 16. It's mad to think he was only 16 when he made his debut in that friendly as well. He talks about the influence of Neil Critchley and Alex Inglethorpe on his progression and his acceleration into the first team, and how he adapted to be a right back, because originally he was a centre midfield, wasn't he? And he talks about studying Philip Lam and Dani Alves along with his coaches. And I loved the bit about how he talks about he plays chess with Ben Woodburn when they're travelling. It's not something you expect from a footballer, is it? But it's just a nice story, isn't it, Paul? Because he grows up in West Derby. He's a local lad. In the interview, it mentions him standing on the bins at Melwood to be able to get a glimpse into the first team players, which I love because he's now a first team player. Klopp's said before that he's in the team because he's a quality footballer, not because he's a Scouser, not because he's Trent. But it is important to have a local player in the side, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I love it when you hear all the stuff about him standing on bins and stuff when he was a kid, because I always think, is that true? Is that just something you just add into the story to make it look?
Let's not ruin the.
Is that just? I'd imagine speaking to him and going, no, my mum would never let me stand on the bins. She was too busy teaching me how to play chess. But the story as a whole is great, and it's obviously it's not necessary to have a local player in the team, but it's just nicer. There's that added level of connection, especially when, this is very soppy, I'm getting a bit older these days, and he is a young lad compared to me, but he comes across as a really nice lad, and he's obviously been brought up really well, and even you see the stuff he's doing with charities in the local area, and apparently he's always done that, and he tells stories in the piece about his mum bringing presents to the coaches and bringing donuts to Melwood.
I like that, yeah.
That was one of my favourite bits, where he said, when I went to Melwood I thought, she'll stop now, and she didn't. She carried on bringing stuff in, and everyone was made up. So yeah, it's brilliant. There's a boss bit in it as well about how he became a right back, which was interesting, wasn't it? Did you see that bit where
it was, yeah.
He basically said, we sat down, me and Critchley and Inglethorpe sat down and planned out how I would get into the first team, and it was what we were all looking at years ago, where we only had one senior right back, and he was like, well, you can carry on playing centre mid, but there's all these lads ahead of you, not only in the first team but under 23s ahead of you, whereas we turn you into a right back, you've only got a couple of people ahead of you, and they must be made up with that, mustn't they? The likes of Inglethorpe must be made up, because it's worked really well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, he speaks so highly of both of them, and about how they were sort of pivotal in his progression, throughout the youth sides, and getting into the first team as well. But yeah, it's interesting to sort of see that, because you don't hear that level of honesty from footballers. You don't, the fact that he just sat down and thought, right, this is how I get in the first team, I'm going to do this, and how he sort of adapted his game, adapted his thinking, because he talks in the interview about how he's attacking minded, but he had to learn how to defend, he had to know when to push forward, when to hold, and I found that really interesting. But he's had a brilliant season. He's probably played a lot more football than we all would have imagined he did at the start of the season. Obviously helped by the Klein injury, but he played 5 in the Champions League. He scored 2. That includes the qualifier, obviously the Hoffenheim goal, which I could talk about all day, Paul. I think I've watched it about 1 million times now. It's one of my favourite goals of the season, and one of my favourite let-offs of the season as well. I wasn't at the game, but just seeing a young local lad do that, it made it so much more exciting.
Yeah, well, this is one of my favourite things with them. I think I might have said this on a video a couple of weeks ago. One of my big things about football now is football fans as a whole, Liverpool fans in particular. We underestimate what we've got ourselves and overestimate what everyone else has got. And I like to think, what would we think about Trent if he played for somebody else? What if this was a kid playing at 19 years old in the Champions League, scoring free kicks like that? He scored 2 goals in the Champions League. I'd love to see what senior players who've scored fewer than him, and he's playing right back. That's 3 goals for a 19-year-old right back. Rob Jones was my favourite player growing up, and loads of you might not have even heard of Jones, and he was phenomenal. He's the best right back I've ever seen. Never scored a goal. It was like, it became a running joke in the ground that his odds for scoring a goal got driven down to like 7-1 at one point, because everybody in the stadium was putting a bet on him for first goal scorer. Never scored, and he was brilliant. And Trent's already got 3 goals in his first full season as a senior pro. We shouldn't underestimate how good that is. And on the Hoffenheim one, the biggest thing about me, and this is something he mentions in the piece, which I love, the balls he shows. Like he's basically saying, I'll take the corners, I'll take the free kick, I'm brilliant at these, don't worry about it, I know I can take this and score. And for the other senior players around him to say, they must have seen how good he is in training.
I remember Emre Can in one of the home games afterwards. We got a free kick, and I think it was Coutinho was about to go and hit it, and then he was shouting at Trent to say, "No, here you come on, man." And that's like a 19-year-old. I think he's 19. 19-year-old lad. And he's, whenever you've got players of like international quality and they're turning to a 19-year-old lad to hit a free kick, I think that says everything about what they think and their belief in him. I remember Gareth and John talking about when they were in Hong Kong last year and they watched the open training sessions and they were taken aback by just not by Trent's quality, but the fact that he didn't look out of place physically as well, despite being a young lad. That same goes for Ben Woodburn as well, but that almost like took them by surprise.
There's a great bit in it as well where he talks about that. I wrote an article about this on the site the other week about...
Good plug in there.
Yeah, do you like that? Didn't even have to ask me to do that. And I wrote it about controlled aggression and how I think the club needs more controlled aggression from top to bottom. That's what's always been the driving force behind us. And since then, I'm not saying they read my articles, but since then Klopp said it. And now Trent's saying it as well. He talks about controlled anger in this piece. So if you're not reading my articles, you're behind the times, I'm thinking. And I'm not claiming full credit for the whole thing, but maybe, Joe, if he scores again in the Champions League, I might expect a little wave.
I'm a big fan of you seeing them come out with that and first thing thinking they've been reading my articles.
100%, yeah.
That's the way you have to think. You know what I mean? Don't rule anything.
Well, I
out.
was clearly the first person who's ever thought of that. That's nice. So if they've thought it as well, it must be from me. But I love that on a serious note. Like I love him talking about it. And he was talking about being Scouse and the Scouse attitude of controlled anger and the Gerrard and the Carragers want to win every tackle and win every game. And there's a Shankly quote I was reading before in your office about, Joe, if he was a cleaner, he'd want his floor to be cleaner than your floor, and he just wants to win that as well. And I love that whole thing. And it's not a leap, is it? We're already saying, and he's talking about the sky's the limit and being a future captain of the club.
He's talked about that before, which I'm well behind. The fact that he's even thinking like that and has the belief in himself for that to actually happen. He started 13 in the Premier League. He scored 1 against Swansea, the one at the Cop End. You see him celebrate, and that's the celebration of a lad that's grown up supporting Liverpool and just gets it and gets through traditions and has dreamt of that moment his whole life. And that's the one that we all dream of, and I think that's why we all, not just because of his quality, but the fact that he is a Liverpool fan. That's why it's so much easier to get behind it. And as well, if he makes a mistake, we know he's young, he's going to make mistakes. I would rather a young player like Trent Alexander-Arnold in that position making mistakes like he did at Man United, but learning from them, than a 27, 28-year-old backup right back that's never really going to amount to anything and is going to move on pretty quickly.
Are you saying you'd prefer to have him than Philip Degan?
Pretty much. No, but definitely you'd just rather him make the mistakes and learn from it and become a better player.
I think Degan was better.
Oh God, we're gonna have to start this talking heads again. But yeah, there was a nice quote in there. He says, "The dream and the plan for me is to be as successful as possible at this club and bring as much silverware as possible and hopefully become the best I can be." In terms of next season, he's played a lot more football than he expected, as I said earlier, because of the Nathaniel Klein injury. Do you think, with Klein plays the under-23s last night, do you think the fact that it's likely he'll come back into the first team at some stage, does that, will that stall his progress? Do you think maybe we look at moving Gomez then? Where do you think he fits in next season? I
think it's potentially even a tricky one for the end of this season, subject to what happens with the Champions League. As I was saying, even last season, I'm a big fan of Klein. I should say I was a right back in school and growing up, and used to fancy myself as a quality right back. So
you're about to compare yourself to Nathaniel Klein here?
Probably. But so I've got an affinity with fullbacks. I love them. I think they're underrated, and especially in the modern game. It was funny the other month when Gary Neville said he was made up. He played in the era he did because he'd hate to play fullback now because they're expected to do so much.
Yeah.
And Klein is clearly, and you can see when we miss him this season, especially defensively, how solid he was. And I think you can take for granted 7 out of 10 players, people who consistently just give you 7 and 8 out of 10, Steve Finnan type lads who are really important. But we were saying last season that you've got this lad in the background, Trent, who's an attacking force coming through, who maybe in home games where you need to break people down, he's going to be more valuable than someone like Klein. But then what we've had recently with the mistake Trent made at Old Trafford, I just wonder now whether we get to the end of this season, if Klein's back to full fitness and he starts playing a few league games, if you get to a Champions League semi-final and a final, do you throw your 19-year-old kid in even though he's done so well, or do you go with your tried and trusted stalwart, the guy you know you can rely on? And I think that's a big call even for the end of this season before we even get into next season.
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've not really thought about that. I think we've almost ruled Klein out for the season, hadn't we? When the continual injuries and doubt over whether he'd be back, it felt as if he was going to be back this month, then he wasn't, then it was another 3 months out. I think it all really depends on how he performs in the under 23s and how quickly he regains his match fitness, because the sad fact is that if he does and he looks good in training, he probably does get the big game. You probably do go to someone like that.
Do you think?
I think so. I just think so. I think if you look at what Nathaniel Klein did last season, that's exactly what he was. He was a 7 out of 10. Most weeks he didn't really drop below it. He didn't go much higher than it. And the one thing that was levelled at him was that he's not attacking enough. He doesn't offer you enough going forward. But I think he offered so much at the back, so much stability, and just someone. He's just another lad that you can put in the team no matter what, and you can rely on him. And I think if you've got a semi-final, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but if you've got a semi-final against Barcelona or a final against Real Madrid, are you really throwing the 19-year-old who's barely played 20 first team games, or are you going for the England international that's played at tournaments and so on? I think someone like Klein probably gets it.
I think that the sell to Trent and to Gomez as well in that situation is you're gonna get loads of Champions League football in the future. This won't be your last Champions League final, your last Champions League semi-final. So you've had a great season. Let's put the old lad in now to win the trophy, and then you get your winner's medal, and then we go from there.
Definitely, yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Trent Alexander. I'm excited about it. The last line in the article was "the sky's the limit," and I truly believe that's the case for him. We spoke a little bit there about the under 23s. They were beaten last night 3-1 by Middlesbrough. Adam Bogdan, who did you know he still played for us?
I wasn't sure he was still alive.
I completely forgot about him.
When you have those conversations with people and they're like, did he die last year or not? Clearly
he's alive and kicking, and
still dropping balls.
Yeah, still, same old. Beaten 3-1. I saw Andy Kelly tweet last night saying that he was it 2-0 down. Adam Bogdan drops across. And it was just one of those inevitable things that you knew would happen. I remember the first time he played for Liverpool, actually. It was under Rodgers, in Rodgers' last season, and he played in the League Cup, I think it was, and I was at the game. And I remember him making a couple of decent saves and me thinking, he's all right here. And that was despite the fact that a mate of mine's a Bolton season ticket holder, and when we signed him, he texted me saying, "Why are you doing this?"
Did you say because he had a good game against us, and that's our scouting policy?
That used to be our scouting policy. Yeah. I think there was a couple of question marks over why he was back, in that you wonder whether how useful it is playing Adam Bogdan in a game like that, or whether you play a young lad. So Grabara was away with Poland, I think. He would usually play. Watched him a few times this season. He's looked really promising. But then there was Jamal George, who we've seen in a couple of pre-season friendlies. The one where Klopp plays him up front. I think it was at Wigan.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
He's
he
massive,
was on the bench. Yeah, he's absolutely massive. I think he was on loan earlier this season. He's now back. Where do you stand on this? Do you think, do you think should we be giving Adam Bogdan more chances when we know he's never going to reach the first team, or is it a case of someone like Jamal George should play?
I think this is probably one of those points where we all just think about the football, and running a football club's much more complicated than that. So there could well be an argument that you need to play Adam Bogdan to remind everyone he still exists. because you're trying to get rid of him. And the reality is, if Liverpool supporters forget he's there and forget I love thinking about this in the summer. You see the lists of free agents who are available, and then you see interviews with people and you think, and he's like, I've just dropped out the game, no one wanted me. And I always think, we were talking about Markovic a few weeks ago, me and Robbo, and he must be better than we think he is. He must be good enough to play in the Championship or to play in a division across Europe. And I just think it gets to a point where some players just get completely forgotten about, and it's a bit like with managerial appointments where it's like this merry-go-round, and if you're in the mind of agents and things, it's sound, but without being seen playing football, how do you get a move somewhere else? So there could be an element of that in it, and I think ultimately I don't really care that much. Do you?
No, me either. We'll talk a little bit more about those that are out on loan from Liverpool at the minute in the next section, but right now it's the papers. We'll have a look at the papers now. In the previous section we talked a little bit about the under-23s. James Pearce done a really good article in today's Echo. I think he speaks to Julian Ward, who's Liverpool's Loan Pathways and Football Partnerships Manager, about the process that they go through whenever they're loaning out players, how they pick teams. They don't just send them to anyone. You read about these clauses they put in about making sure that they're playing a certain amount of first team games. It's really interesting, but he's had a look at the different players that we have out on loan. It's actually mad. We've forgotten about some of these, haven't we? Yeah. The first thing to note, we found a really good fact about Divock Origi's dad.
I love this. guess what? I'll give you a second. Guess what Divock Origi's dad's name is? Mike. Mike Origi. That's not real, that is it?
Divock's a cool name.
There's something got on there. Do you reckon Mike has gone? He's there in Belgium and he's gone. Could call him Paul, Craig, Tom. No. Let's give him something cool. Yeah. Mike's boring. Mike Origi.
So Divock Origi's one of the ones. I think he's had a bit of an up and down season after a bright start. I think he's at Wolfsburg. A few of the other ones they talk about, a couple of positives. First of all, Harry Wilson. Harry Wilson's gone on loan to Hull this season. I think it was in January. He scored 3 goals in 6 league appearances, 2 assists. He's actually starting for Wales now in China, which feels really weird, but that's just a sign of how far he's come this season in terms of, you can get into this cycle of being an under-23s player and just continually playing season after season there, and when you go out on loan not really doing it and not really looking up to much, and then they're just released or they go elsewhere. That's not happening for Harry Wilson at the minute.
Yeah, he's a dead interesting one. I was saying to Craig a minute ago, have a look. If you haven't seen his goals, have a look. I'm guessing that they'll be knocking around the internet somewhere. He looks like a proper footballer. He doesn't look like a kid. And I've seen some comments from Hull fans who just love him. They think he's brilliant. And I often think about, for lads like him, we've had this thing with Klopp where he didn't believe in the loan system. Now he clearly does think it's something that's valuable because we've got a fellow with a long snazzy title in charge of it all. And if you think about Harry Wilson and what he's done, he's gone in January to a Championship club under pressure, scoring goals for the first team, making an impact, getting great experience. And then I think of the likes of Dom Solanke, who doesn't really play football anymore. Yeah. And he dropped down to the 23s a couple of weeks ago and just banged in a load of goals because he was like, well, this is too easy for me now. But then week by week, he doesn't get to play. He just trains, and then he gets brought on as a sub, or he gets 10 minutes here and there, and we all expect him to be brilliant. And I just think it's really difficult for them, isn't it? Yeah. And Harry Wilson's a great example of what you have to do if you go out on loan, what you have to do if you're not at Liverpool and you're trying to force your way back in. You need to be the best. You need to go to Hull and be their best player.
Yeah, you do. If you have any chance of sort of figuring in Jurgen Klopp's plans, like, down the years we've seen loads of players go out and look decent elsewhere, but they come back and then immediately they're either shipped out or they're sold. I think, like we were talking there as well before we came on camera, about just how many of these lads that we'd forgotten about, and that's kind of a sign of probably how they're doing in their at their loan clubs. Yeah. The likes of Lazar Markovic, 20 minutes of football he's played since he joined Anderlecht in January. Like, his value just continues to nosedive. Like, I feel really sorry for him at this stage.
Rob and I talked about him on the first one of these I did a couple of months ago, and he's just a mystery. He's an absolute mystery. It's like he's just forgotten how to play footy. Remember when we were first linked with him, everyone was talking about him like being this amazing signing, and what a lad, what a coup from getting him. And now we can't even get a game for, is it Anderlecht, did you say?
Yeah, it's Anderlecht,
But it's same for Divock Origi, Mike's lad. Like, what's he doing now? What's he scored? 5 goals in 27 appearances in the Bundesliga. Well, that's
disappointing, isn't it?
When you bear in mind, Harry Wilson scored 3 in the Championship for Hull. And Divock's got designs on being Belgium's main centre-forward and forcing his way back in. It's just, ultimately, it's not good enough. And this is all about, will they get a chance back at Liverpool and will they force their way back in? Well, you can pretty much say no is the answer to that, isn't it?
Yeah, like the thing with Lazar Markovic is he signed for Hull on loan, didn't he, under Marco Silva? And for 6 months he looked quite good.
Yeah.
Like he looked as if he could do a job, and it's funny, you said before, it's almost as if, you know, if they haven't played for a while, they're almost forgotten about. And you wonder if that's the case with Lazar Markovic, because, you know, when we signed him from Benfica, he was scoring goals in the Europa League. He was doing really well in the Portuguese league. He was tracked by Chelsea. He was really highly rated around Europe. And for him just to now, sort of 4 or 5 years later, just be at the stage where he can't get a game for Anderlecht, it's kind of sad.
It shows you. Sorry, it actually shows you how much mental strength goes into being a footballer as well, and how you've got it. It's self-belief more than anything else. Plugging articles again. I've written an article for the site today.
Oh, here you go.
I don't get paid for the number of views either, so it doesn't matter. But I've said about Emre Can, and obviously there's the big story, and they came out yesterday about him basically saying I should play for one of the very big clubs, and people are going mad about it. But part of what I've said in my article is that's what we want, isn't it? We want players with self-belief that says I'm one of the best in the world and I should play for one of the best, and in my opinion we should make it so those players want to play for Liverpool. I think the problem the likes of Markovic have got, I think if you asked him how good he was now, he'd probably say I don't think I'm very good anymore, to be honest, and you lose that belief, and once that's gone,
I think that was. I always worried that was the problem with Lazar Markovic. As soon as he signed, he didn't look as if. I remember him being thrown in the derby against Everton. He just didn't look as if he was interested. And even going back to last season against Tranmere, he comes on as a sub in the friendly, and again he just didn't. He just looked so far off the pace, and just. Yeah, it is one of those where it'd be interesting to see once he finally leaves Liverpool permanently, who picks him up, what he does next, and how he progresses from here. Marco Grujic as well, having a really good season at Cardiff City. It's worth mentioning as well. We'll have a look at a couple of other things. Jack Wilshere's all over the papers today. The Mirror and the Times, I think. He's actually been linked. Well, he's been said to be being monitored by Liverpool, which is surprising, I suppose. You could say it's maybe similar to the Oxlade-Chamberlain thing. I just think I'm not a fan of Jack Wilshere, I'll be honest. He's almost resurrected his Arsenal career this season in terms of they said that he was available to be bought last summer. He was out on loan the season before at Bournemouth. You know, he didn't pull up any trees, he didn't light up the Premier League, did he? He's obviously got injury problems. He's just been called up to England though, and he's been offered a contract by Arsenal, but he talks in one of the interviews saying that he'll consider his options. Would you have him at Liverpool?
No.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
We were talking about this before we started recording. Jack Wilshere is one of those players. I'm not going to be one that criticises people for making a lot of money. It's the going rate or whatever. But one of the things he's moaning about in this piece is, I don't know whether there's a quote from him, but basically all of the stories seem to be saying he's not happy that he's been asked to take a pay cut and start going on a pay-as-you-play deal to top up. So, and when we're talking about pay cut, they want him to go down from £110,000 a week to £90,000 a week, which must be really difficult to live off. Obviously, imagine that conversation. What, you only want me to take £90,000 a week, every week? What am I meant to do with that? And what annoys me about people like that is he hasn't been playing. He's been injured. It's not like he's the best player in the club and they've said to him, take a pay cut. We want to put you on a deal that reflects your fitness and will you prove yourself? He's basically just saying, no, I'm better than that. Well, prove you're better than that.
But it's plus incentives as well. Like it's saying it's a pay-as-you-play deal.
Well, what they're saying is, take a cut on your basic, and if you can prove that you can play,
and you play
like you
and
say
score
you
goals,
are,
you assist, you make money.
You earn more than you earn now. So for me, that attitude is exactly why I wouldn't want him, and I'm guessing why Klopp wouldn't want him, despite the links. That what he's effectively saying is, no, I want my guaranteed money whether or not I play. And you're like, well, where's your incentive?
It's a resounding no on Jack Wilshere.
No.
Thank God.
And people listen to us. You've realise that.
Yeah, just lastly, quickly, on the back of the mirror as well, Klopp eyeing Jorginho to replace Chan. There was the quotes from Chan yesterday, some of which I felt some of them were taken out of context. I don't have them here, but there was talk of him, as you said, wanting to play for a big club. Well, we're a big club, and he doesn't say that he wants to play for another big club, does he? Yeah. And he talked highly about Liverpool. He spoke highly of Klopp and how when he first joined there were comparisons with Gerrard and how he sort of had to overcome them, but now he has the confidence to play at an elite stage, and he's in Germany's squad as well, so he's obviously he's a really good player, and we talk about potential with Emre Can and about consistency with him as well, but it'll be interesting to see whether he is still here at the end of the season. He seems to be keeping his cards close to his chest and not, Juventus are coming out saying they haven't struck up a deal with him. Liverpool have said that they're waiting until the end of the season, as is Emre Can. It feels as if he's going, doesn't it?
Do you think?
I think it is.
I still think there's a chance he signs, because he hasn't signed for Juve. So who's he waiting for? Because one of the comments he did make, for anyone who hasn't seen the interview, it's just a nonsense interview that someone's put a mic under him on international duty and asked him the question.
Always happens, every time.
And he talks about every league basically and compliments every league, but he does make a point of saying the Bundesliga has gone down.
Yeah.
So is he waiting for Munich to come back to him or not? Is he waiting for Man City? I don't know what he wants, but the reality is, if he goes, he goes. I'm past. Maybe it's my age, and maybe I've had my heart broken too many times by too many better players than Emre Can. I'm not really bothered. I think he's a very good player and he could be great. But he is getting to that stage now. For those of you who remember Jamie Redknapp, I remember saying about Jamie Redknapp once, he's still got loads of potential. I love him. And someone said to me, he's 28. And Emre's getting to that level now. He's 24, 25. Should there still be potential at that level? Should he be a bit better and more consistent? I've never seen Jorginho, but for 50 million quid, I'm guessing he's all right.
Yeah, he has a lovely Brazilian sounding name, which I'm a big fan of. But yeah, I love all the rumours you hear as well, like the rumours about Emre Can buying his house in Formby and stuff like that. I love all that sort of stuff in the build up to whether a player is going to be leaving or whether he stays. On that note, on some of today's shows we've got on Top Player, we've got The Gutter back. It's been recorded today, it'll be out tonight. If you haven't listened to that before, it's Rob Gutman who gets very excited about transfers. He'll be talking about Jorginho, about the links to Timo Werner in the Independent last week, Ndidi, and a bit of Lamar as well. There's also his overview today, and I asked Neil what this was about today, and his exact words were why we've been boss recently and why we'll continue to be. So I'm into that. And just a quick mention as well for a Naby Keita documentary that we've been working on. It'll be out next Tuesday, so have a look out for that. There's also a Robertson special. The Naby Keita ones, we speak to journalists, we speak to a Leipzig fan, and a couple of other people who are in the know about Naby Keita, just to get an update on how he's done this season and what he can offer Liverpool.
Do they say he's boss?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's resounding in that, and he's probably one of the. I don't think I've ever been as excited about a new player coming to Liverpool as Naby Keita, but that's been Talking Reds.